Yeah, transition isn't always easy. Like, you kind of need some of the stuff to happen in order to like rebuild and to like, change for the better. Hello, 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 and welcome back to this podcast, which is called Biz on the Brain, short for business on the brain. But we've got a lot more stuff on the brain. And this episode, with the amazing Marissa Lada from Lune, Hivery, we're gonna deep dive into so many other things because we both have ADHD, but we like to talk about travel and about how colors affect your mood and what interior design does, and if you were living in a van, and also what it's like to connect with people from out all of the entire world, but with actually not meeting them in person. But when you do meet them in person, like there's so many cool topics all around how to be yourself unapologetically and authentically, which is the core essence of this entire podcast, which is all around just having conversations with amazing people with whatever background or whatever experiences. The amazing part of just having conversations that are unscripted, that are unplanned, is that you never know what's going to happen. And I personally always get little light bulb moments, little epiphanies, just hearing other people's approaches, other people's experiences, validating mine, or opening up a new avenue for me to maybe pursue or maybe look into, or just having something mirrored back to me, helping me on my self-reflective path, and self-development. And that's why I absolutely love conversation. It's why I'm bottling them up in this podcast. And so without further ado, I want to introduce you to the wonderful Marissa. All right, let's just start before anything else happens. Oh my gosh. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited. I just love chatting, so I'm excited to see what we'll chat about today. Me too. You never know what's going to happen on this podcast, because I just, found you on TikTok, and I thought you were amazing. I dropped a couple comments, and I was like, heck, I'm just going to ask you if you just want to be on my podcast. And then you said yes, and I'm like, here we are. No, thank you. I honestly, that's how I meet so many people nowadays, like on TikTok. And for those who aren't on it, there's just like a whole misconception about like, oh, it's dancing videos and it's this. I'm like, I've learned so much more on TikTok than I have in all of my schooling. Exactly. We call it TikTok University. There's so many things for anything. How to clean your home, how to work with your mental trauma, like, with like a caveat of things you have to see a therapist, but also how to find people like you, because you realize there's so many other weird people out there who've gone through the exact same thing that you have. You always have you're so special and your little sadness, right? So it so helps me, like it really helps me figure out that I have ADHD, and now I have a diagnosis. So yeah, it's legit. And there's also these amazing people that you just vibe with, and you're like, oh my God, I would not have found you on Instagram because the algorithm sucks, but also it's much more curated. On TikTok, you can be feral. And I love that. I love that energy in my life. Yes, I agree. It's and I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that just like, yeah, the people who content create on TikTok too are like the super weirdos, which like people love watching that, but it's hard for us sometimes, at least I can speak from my experience, to like let that weirdness out in like the real world. And I have been since, but like TikTok is such a nice platform too, because you get to talk about what you're so passionate about and share that knowledge with others. And that's like what I love to do. So I'm just like a wealth of like, let me just share, and whoever wants to like listen, great. Like you'll get some information that hopefully is helpful. Exactly. It's so also so much low key, low effort. Like when people tell me, because I work in a lot of different things with social media marketing, like in the visual side and the strategic side, all of the things where people can get stuck on. What I always hear is, I don't feel camera ready. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to focus on. I'm not sure. All of these things where you want to optimize it for your business, where you want to be strategic or professional, whatever that means. And then you just don't do it. Just don't take the action, or you take the action and it's super bland. It's super neat to a point where it's not really relatable or it's not effective really, because there's so many other people out there who do the same thing that you do. So if you just fully are yourself and share all your stories, your failures, all of your quirks and random stuff throughout your day, you can build your personality brand. And that's been a huge trend over the past couple of years, especially with like content creators and influencers. But it is so much more accessible and so much more endearing, like on TikTok, because you can literally show up with no makeup. You can put on a filter if you want, nobody cares. You can drink a coffee, that's fine. You can just like make the worst like cuts. You can like have like to ramble on, share your random thoughts. And I don't see that on any other platform as successful or as like as authentic as on TikTok. And then I also say to people, go get TikTok, use it as your playground, as your experimental realm, where you just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, and at the same time tune into yourself to see what you actually like. Because the more you try out different things, the more you realize what you like and what you don't like, and then you can access that part easier and better, and you can fine tune that. And then it's not necessarily about what they want, but it's also how you feel good, and that attracts other people to you. So like it's both way you look at your ideal customer, but also you look at yourself and your comfort levels for a sustainable approach. And just because, when you run your own business, you should run it according to you. Otherwise you could just be employed and do it for somebody else anyway.
Yeah, that's what I've really liked about it, because I ironically as much like, so for context too, I work with homes, and like I went to school for interior design, and I love dressing up and all of that, but I don't like doing that all the time, especially for myself. Like sometimes I just want to wear sweatpants, and I've been also working on our house renovation, so I am in like work clothes, and there is such less pressure to come on and not be polished when you talk and just be like, I'm in my glasses, I don't have makeup on, I just woke up, my hair's a mess, but like also this is the real me. And people, I think, want that nowadays. Like the Instagram, like fake filters and all of the just like fakeness. People want authenticity. At least that's what I feel, and that is definitely how I like to be. And just like I can't be anything else. Like I've tried in some ways. My mental health suffers, and I'm like, that is so important for my health and happiness, is just to be truly authentically me, and people like relate to that.
No, that's so true. And because I come from the travel blogging background, I've always struggled with that. My mental health was affected by it so much, not just the numbers, but also this artificiality. Because ironically, people say, ugh, like it's not realistic that you like hike in a ball gown up like a mountain and take a photo in the wind with your floppy head. And like that's true. And I never was able to do that. And I was like, F that, that's not gonna like, no, you're gonna get me in like hiking boots, shabby like jeans, whatever. So I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. That's too much work. I don't care. And also, who does that? It's so true. But at the same time, that's actually what people still consume. Like people still like they say that they don't want that fakeness, but that's still something that feels aspirational, that still feels cool to consume. And on TikTok, no. Like on TikTok, you can do whatever you want, and the algorithm is so much more specific, the way you use your hashtags and the way people engage with it. So you can really create your space, and the algorithm doesn't like punish you as it would be on other platforms if you're not playing by the rules. TikTok really just wants to see if there's an audience. If so, then it will be projected more. And so you can just use those hashtags to just really actually tailor your content to specific niches. So you don't have to be the niche or just focus like on this one specific thing, especially if you're a generalist, that sucks. And so TikTok is really perfect for ADHD people. You can get distracted, you can learn how to cook, you can learn how to clean, you can like find people who tell you about marketing on like some random obscure site, I don't know, or a certain like age group, whatever. Or you can just find spiritual people, and it changes so fast depending on what your current interests are. And that way you can also mostly gain people who've never heard of you before. So it's great for spanning your net wide and then seeing what sticks. And then you can like backward strategize it by actually optimizing, because you should do that on every platform. But for a lot of them, it's just shooting in the dark. You just like, let's just make up a strategy and run with it, and then maybe assess it down the line. And then with TikTok's like, let's just do all the things. And then we can like hone it down.
Yeah, and I've I've honestly struggled with that too. Cause like when I first started TikTok, it might have been like just new, and it was like back in the 2020, and everyone's like, "Have you heard about this new app called TikTok?" And I was like, "I don't know about that. I don't like." One of the things that I've struggled with as being a business owner is like having to use social media. Personally, I'm like, try to be off it as much, but for a business too, it's like, that's just what you need nowadays to be relevant and to be seen, especially for online businesses too. So I was like, oh, I'll download this app, I'll see what it is. And then just like through experimentation and yeah, like sticking stuff on the wall or throwing stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks. I think I'm still in that phase, to be honest, but it was so nice to be able to kind of also see myself grow with social media because, like, for a business owner, yeah, I don't want to say I struggle, but like from my perspective, I'm not a very like camera person. Default on my astrology for that. I'm like I'm a secretive Scorpio, like very reserved. But it's just been so nice too with like trying something new like social media or TikTok, for example, where you're like, I'm showing up and I'm showing up authentically and I'm, just talking about whatever I want to talk about. I've also like seen how just going and being consistent on it, I've grown as a person too, and I've been more comfortable in being my authentic self as well. Like looking back at my first videos from 2020, I cringe a little now, but I'm like, you know what? That was the start of my journey, and we were at there, and now we're at here, and I'm sure I still have places to go. But it's just also nice to like. There's just so much of a complexity that I think is social media, and especially like TikTok itself.
Absolutely. But it also plays into just generally putting yourself out there. Like when I started with YouTube like 10 years ago like somebody challenged me because they were like, your entire personality doesn't fit into a photo and to text. It doesn't really do it justice. Like you're big, you're all of that. I'm like, okay. Oh. And then so I started making videos. That's the most introverted, awkward person, like really quiet. I'm like, I hope nobody is disturbed by me talking loud. It's like it was the worst, super cringe. But I did it and I realized it's kind of fun. And again, I can shape it into any shape or form I want. I can tell stories, I can dress up, I can like give information, or I can just entertain whatever I want. Because, in the beginning, nobody knows you anyway. So, like whatever, go for it, go ham. And so I did that and I realized it's actually fun. I love video editing, I love storytelling, and just by exposing yourself to putting yourself out there in public, doing all of these things, talking to yourself, because a lot of times people would see me with the camera and assume I'm taking a selfie or some sort. And then I would just walk into the frame or something. Like they would always like photobomb me, even though their intention was not to do it, but they never understood how the things work. It was so confusing to them. Like, oh, okay. I don't even know. But the more I did it, the more I learned how to work the camera, how to feel more confident, how to not even obsess over looking at the camera, like, like having this death stare. Oh, and like leading back into yourself, because that's the thing when I like film people or work, they usually need some warm up things where it's just terrible. Like they are so stiff, they sound robotic, their voice changes really weird, they use weird words, and it's just so awkward. So like in the beginning, I will scrap it. I will just like try to get them out of their comfort zone, just get out all of the boring stuff, and then the fun things start when they get used to it, or they realize they can actually talk to me instead of the camera. Like just ignore the thing, right? So like there's all of these practice makes perfect situations where you realize, oh, I can try this thing. Maybe I can use motion next time. Maybe I do cool transitions, and you just slowly experiment and you grow with it. And I think TikTok is really great because you get examples, and you can also play it really safe. You can do like the simplest edits. You can even do one take, just talking to the camera. For some people that's easy, for some people that's hard. So like there's all of these ways you can challenge yourself and get creative, and then realize maybe some random thing you dropped into the conversation they actually suddenly are interested in. Like you usually talk about, I don't know, business, and then suddenly something about your travel stories, and they're like, tell me more. And you're like, okay. So you cannot plan these things, or you get a random question and you realize, oh, I could make a response video to it. And then down the line, you're like, oh, I could do like a follow-up response and response. You suddenly have like a series of like 5 interconnected things, and you didn't sit there and do a content plan. You just did it because it felt natural in the moment, and it might not actually be something that you want to keep doing. But in the moment, it just feels good. And the more you do that, the more you realize it's not just some marketing thing that you kind of have to do or that's trendy, but it can also be good for you other than just validation, and just be like externalizing your thoughts. You can use it as your diary. You can use it to just ask, just to hear from certain people. You can like shout out, I need to work with those kind of creative people. Anybody want to get in touch? You can use it for so many different things. Or you just need help. Like, I don't know how to assemble this IKEA furniture. Somebody help. And you might find somebody who does a tutorial for you. Like the nicest things.
I agree. Yeah, all of that. And that's where I've like sometimes I've had videos where I talk about one thing and then like yeah, it kind of follows through in a different aspect and like, I'm still working on I think sharing a little more of my personal life because I've built more of a business and I know that that's typically a transition for people who start with creating content for a specific purpose and then they're like, oh, people want to know me and my personality and let me share like, what's happening in my life. And that's kind of where I'm in this transition where I'm like, do people want to know? And like, I will share, but sometimes it's like a blank or not a blank canvas, open ocean sort of where you're like, what?
Quite a lot. Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Because kind of like, you're mentioning something where it's like personalities being too big to contain and like, Instagram post or just like a very static photo. And that's what is nice about video content, which is why I've liked TikTok because like I've thought about YouTube, but I'm like, oh man, it's just like there's that mental like challenge or hurdle to overcome of like 10-minute videos and editing and all that. And TikTok is like a really great transition or start because it is so easy to edit on the app. It is so easy to just have a minute video and just to talk and play around with things. So I would say like, yeah, if anyone's interested in starting and pursuing that, like hop on TikTok, even just to learn stuff. But then like, yeah, it's a great tool for also becoming more confident in yourself too. And that is something I have learned too with just like any social media. You are probably going to get people commenting negatively, haters, all of that. And at some point in my life and journey, I would have not been able to handle that. And I feel like with this, I've grown enough to be like, nope, I've gotten thicker skin. I just appreciate too, like that sort of journey too, where it's like, this is just an inevitable part of being on the internet, but also like I'm at a place right now too, where it's not affecting me like it would maybe, 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, that is so important. And I still struggle with that because I take a lot of things like personally, but like so many people have just time on the internet and then it's never really about you exactly. It's just projection on, whatever they want to see or they want to criticize, or maybe they're having a bad day and you're just the easy target. And just, I find TikTok, unless you like land on the wrong side of TikTok and suddenly like thrown for the wolves. But usually the community is really nice and supportive. Like the other day, I just dressed up for a change instead of wearing like my everyday couch potato outfits. And I was like so proud of it. And then just filmed it and I put it on TikTok. I was like, oh my God, please be kind, people. I was like, I just want to show off my fit. And that was it. There was like no point to it, just other than like I needed validation. And I thought it was cute. And then people were like, you're so cute. I'm like, oh, okay. So I was like, oh, that's great. It's like no, like pass the vibe check. So like it's good.
Yeah, I laugh because I'm pretty naive of a person, I will say. So when people would, because I used to go on lives a lot, and people would say, "Oh, fit check," and I'm so embarrassed, but I'm like, you know what? This is just me. I'm sometimes a little bit of a naive person, where I literally thought they meant like Fitbit. Like I have a Fitbit, so I was like, thought they were asking for my steps. So I was like, oh, I meant like 5,000 a day. I didn't know it meant outfit. And now I've realized, I'm like, wow, how many times have I just like told them the wrong thing and they're like, what the heck?
I mean, that's me too. Like I sometimes go through life and then people educate me on things that like for the longest time I didn't know what Netflix and chill meant. I was just like, you want to just watch a movie? Cool. I was like, oh.
Same.
I was like, wait, what's going on?
I've been humbled by the language of the next generation where I'm now like, I'm not there. I'm not cool enough to say those things, but I understand what they mean now, which is very important.
Exactly. But also you're too old to like to use it anyway. Like it would be cringe.
Yeah, I'm just like I couldn't. I don't know. I know there's a lot of spoofs about how like Gen Z talks, and I like there is a lot of satire to
Every
this.
generation, I feel.
Yeah, and that's so true. Like even the lingo back in my day, I was like, language is such a powerful tool, and I get fascinated kind of by it, how it,
Mhm.
the language changes or like the slang and all of that, and how that sort of happened. Um, Also, I will say this, you have frozen again.
Am I frozen?
Yeah, I don't know why it keeps doing that.
I don't know. I see everything moving on my end. It's really weird. And let me scribble down. 1851. I can do that. 1851. Frozen? No.
Yeah, it's okay. It might just I don't know if it's just needing yeah, okay, I can see you now. I don't know why it just, like, freezes and then it doesn't
I don't
regulate
know.
itself.
It's so
Um,
weird.
but anyway, just let that
It's
be known.
No, that's okay. I don't know what it will record, so like better to check.
Yeah, but, anyway, where were we? That's the problem with ADHD is, like, once you kind of stop
I feel right.
uh,
Damn it, what were we talking about? Fits, misunderstanding.
TikTok.
Okay.
I know
Yeah,
we've been on a TikTok roll for a while.
yeah. Okay, okay. No, but like that's what I also like about TikTok. I can like learn about the current language, the current lingos, and all of the cool trends, and then just sometimes drop it on my friends, and they've never heard of things, and I'm like, well, you haven't been on TikTok. So I'm like just like the cool elder millennial, and they don't even appreciate how cool I am in my head. So
Yeah, there's just so much stuff or at least I have learned on there that I also, not to go down conspiracies, but like I feel that just like mainstream media doesn't cover.
oh,
And it's like through TikTok that you're learning this stuff and it's just bringing more awareness. And I've learned so much stuff about, yeah, like again, don't want to say conspiracy because that tends to have a negative, like that term has a negative connotation, but like a lot of those things are I feel true. Like the whole egg conspiracy in the US, that happened like maybe a couple months ago where people who were having chickens, their eggs were their chickens were laying eggs because it was due to the feed that they were it's like there's this whole network of just things that I'm fascinated to learn and get like the inside scoop because that's where it's like I love to just try to find the truth and that's really hard to find today in like kind of tying it back to the fake social media and the fake photos and the inauthenticity even I think there is more of a push, but sometimes it's hard to discern that.
yeah, you always have to be really careful because a lot of things can be edited, but also there's a lot of like news coverage that doesn't get streamed anymore on like the regular TV stations. And I always like to look at different TV stations from, different countries. Like, not just like German TV, but like sometimes I watch like US and like the different reporting focal points. And then you just go on TikTok and somebody has like a live video of like an actual thing going on. And you're like, oh, or like, when still stuff goes on in Iran, like, why is that not on the news? Like, it's still a problem. Or divorce and all of that. Like, it's just, it's always difficult regarding mental health. Like, I try to limit news intake so I don't like suffer from it. If I can't do anything about it, it's important to be educated, but only to also to a point. And then you have to just not be educated, but you have to also get multiple points to get like a bigger picture because while news reporting is still super, super important, it's also limited in some extent. It is so difficult if you just look at the journalism rankings. Like, the US is pretty bad. Like, if you just look at these rankings that they publish, there's so many limitations to how they can access information, how they can report things. And so I always like to get out different information. And what I've learned is, before I traveled, I was only limited to our news reporting in Germany. And I thought, like, I knew countries because I saw that on TV. It's nothing about the countries, just about certain situations. Like, what do I know about the people? Nothing. And so I had all of these preconceived notions, as you do if you don't untangle that. And then when I traveled to certain countries and people would be like, oh my gosh, like, don't do this thing. I saw that on the news, like somebody was abducted in that town. And like, as if that's like a common thing now, because it's one random person. Well, like at one point I was traveling Australia and I was on a tour through the outback. And then my mom was like super like panic calling me. I was like, why would you call me Australia? That's like expensive. So, and she was like, I saw on the news there was a person being eaten by a crocodile in Australia. I'm like, so just like, yeah, but be careful. Like, are you going anywhere with the crocodiles in Australia? I was like, no. I mean, potentially, but I'm not going to be like there in the water with the crocodiles because like there's, if you're like, for example, if you're like in Australia and anything like above like X mouth, like if you put like a full on horizontal line through the country, anything above that is like crocodile territory. If you see a body of water, you do not go there. You do not even go close. And sometimes even the oceans, like there will be signs. For dumb people, there's always signs saying like, maybe watch out for crocodiles, like watch out. And if they put a sign up there, they know why. And you should know why and you should stay away. A lot of people don't. And that's why that person was eaten, because he went fishing in one of the most crocodile-infested rivers on a little boat with a net. While his wife was watching, and then she was panicking and like called all of the news people, I don't know, whatever. And so I was like, that's on him. Like that is really on him, on that person. It's sad, but it's also stupid. And I'm not doing that. Right. And so she was like, I'm so afraid for you. I'm like, you know what? I could get into trouble anywhere in the world. Like that doesn't really take that much of a it's not really that hard. So so like so many weird things you can like exaggerate by consuming media or like certain times of novels even. Then it gets distorted. When you go out travel, you actually realize you need to listen to the locals, you need to be street smart, you do your research, you do your due diligence, you listen to your gut, and don't be stupid. So really, that's just what it is, and you can do that at home.
Yeah, a lot of that too. Kind of where you're saying, it's good to be informed, yes, and then it's like not to have fear control your life, and that is something I have learned. Because like I come from like fear in my generation. Like my grandma is the one who will call me and like that 1 in 100 chance thing, and she's like, "This happened, be wary," and I'm just like. The chances of that are so low. And I had to overcome that too, because like with traveling, there's so many preconceived ideas, or also like what you are being fed through another person. That is where I've like with the media or like people telling you, oh, I heard this, blah, blah, blah. There's just something I've really gotten to love about traveling and using my intuition and kind of discerning for myself. Like, I'll be the judge of this. So, like, I'm not going to let fear control my life. I'm not going to be, like you said, stupid. It's like using your better judgment and being aware. But that is where it's like tapping into my intuition has really helped me. Like, yes, you're going to find issues probably anywhere you go. But, like, honestly, I felt more safe in foreign countries than the U.S. And I know the U.S. has like a very bad reputation, and rightly so. But that's something too, where it's like traveling has really opened my perception to, just like all of the stereotypes or the misconceived ideas of wherever it is, and just like learning to kind of go with the flow and to follow my intuition and to say, oh, okay, I'm not going to go down that dark alley. I'm getting a bad vibe, or oh, okay, let me like explore this, because I've done things, I don't want to say like that have been like crazy reckless, but like you meet people traveling, especially if you travel solo, and they're, I feel like following that sort of intuition where it's like, let's see where this goes. And obviously you like using my better judgment. Like I've had so many wonderful stories and memories and experiences now because I didn't let fear control my life.
Oh yeah. Like that's how I had the best like day trips, because I usually do it by myself. And sometimes I just run into people in a hostel, even on the street. And like I still like to this day, because in the beginning I was so afraid of going even hitchhiking. I was like, everybody's gonna be an expert, right? And so the more I like allowed my gut to be like, no, they're safe. I'm like, how do you know? How do you know? And then I just did it and I was like, oh, it was safe. And then some people were like, oh, get a weird vibe. And I'm just going to stay clear. I don't even want to try why. And then, the more you lean into that, the more you allow yourself having good incidences and memories, the more you learn that people are like a lot of people were there to help you and will be good to you. And you can have fun with like random people, like go on a day trip and you're still alive. Like at one point I was on a scooter in Phuket, like in Thailand, and I had like just some plans to see a couple of waterfalls, and I was just like cruising. And then as I was exiting one of the waterfalls, like in the middle of the island, there was this snake in the middle of the stairs, and I couldn't pass because I was like, is this like a normal snake? Or is it venomous? Like I don't know the animals there. So I was just standing there, and this stupid thing didn't move at all. It was just looking at me. I'm like, great. And then in front of me were these like Russians trying to like poke it. It was like, that's dumb, don't do that. And it just wouldn't move. And so eventually they started climbing like the wall, like a railing, and then they walking around the snake while I was just looking at the weird humans, and I was doing that too. Until like a local came and he just picked up a stick and he just threw away the snake. I was like, okay, that's how you do it. Cool, learned something new stuff. And I was just like making a fool of myself climbing on this wall, and then this random dude came walking up and I was like, watch out, there's a snake. I think at that point the local hadn't showed up. And I was just like, please don't, like, there's a snake, let's be safe, whatever. And then he was like, okay, cool. And he turned around, he was looking at his phone or whatever. And then he asked me for some directions of some place as if I'd know. And I was like, don't know, but you can just follow me, I'll figure it out. And then he just followed me. And then we spent like the half a day together. I was like, do you want to come to the next beach? I'm like, he's like, sure. And then it was like, this beach. He's like, what about that beach? And so like we found like 6 different beaches just because we wanted to just see them. And like, we didn't even talk really. I don't know, but it was so cool. It was just like, so you have a beach, you lead to the next beach, I lead to that beach. And then I wanted to go see the big Buddha. And he's like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, cool, bye. And it's like, I don't even know that I knew his name or whatever, but we just like, spend some time just cruising around, just company. And then that's that. And I just love that is possible, right? Like I didn't go like, oh my God, he's going to X murder me, or like whatever hit on me, or like, it's just like looked at beaches.
And that's what I like. I miss traveling. I haven't been traveling since the pandemic, but like I love those experiences because when you travel, especially from my experience traveling solo, you're just like more open to those random encounters. And I've had so many of those where you're just like, I don't know if it's like you're just open up to your energy and like attracts like. So because I'm spiritual, like when I go travel, I love to like look at all of the, the temples and the churches and like go and do yoga and things like that. And I've just like met the most random, well, not random, but like in sync people, but just random circumstances. Like I remember I was in an airport, I forgot where, but I was like some guy, I had a backpack with a little mushroom pen, and he's like, I like your mushroom pen. And we just like had a conversation then in the airport while he was waiting for his flight about like, near-death experiences and like, spiritual psychedelic journeys and
Wow.
plant medicine and all of this. And I'm just like, from like just I feel like that's when your energy just syncs up and aligns with people, which is just like, yeah, the joy of traveling.
Yeah, it's just the best. It's not just that you open up because you're already unfamiliar. Like you have to be open because you don't know what's going to happen next. It's like, I guess, part of sort of survival to be like alert, because at home you're on autopilot. You're not like, I don't want to talk to this person on the street because then they might remember me and maybe want to talk to me every day, and I don't want that, or they've seen me be weird and now like they're my neighbors, so like maybe tone that down, whatever. But when you're trouble, you can reinvent yourself. You can take yourself out of situations more easily in some places, right? Like you can be like, oh my God, like I don't want to see this person again, I'm going to move countries, at the extreme, something like that. And at the same time, you can also spot other people like it. So like when you say it's surprising how easy it is for people to talk to you or you to talk to them. What I've always heard is like, it's so much easier to find a single like traveler as opposed to going to that group and trying to insert yourself in this dynamic. It's like when you go to any networking event and they already have like little in groups, it is so hard to just talk to them because I already feel like a little bit closed off. They might not be, but they don't really make an effort to include strangers because they're already entertained. They already have their people. Why would they need to meet somebody new, right? And so it's easier for other people to insert themselves if there's nobody else that they can like detract you from. They only have your attention, and then you can be like yes or no. But it's also not mixing all of the energies of all of these people because especially I've been solo traveling for like a decade now almost, that I've learned it's so hard for me now to compromise on my travel. Like I'll be very specific. And I'll be like, you do your thing, I do my thing. If we can't agree, I will not compromise. I want you to be happy and do your stuff, and I will be happy doing my stuff, and then we can come together on what we both like. But a lot of people don't actually like that. I just want to go like halfway happy traveling and like doing some weird compromise. And I don't understand. Compromise to me is often kind of misunderstood, or maybe I just, like for me, what I see people use it for is like to just get a midway thing for both people, or like maybe one person has to be not, it has to like make way for the other person, and then they get their way. I'm like, that's shitty. Like, why? Because when you travel, like, you're spending so much money, you're already out of your depth. There's like so much the world has to offer. So why would you do this when you're already stressed out and overstimulated? Just get your damn smoothie bowl if that's what you need. And the other person goes, sees a museum if that's what they need. Go do it. Because this, like, we have to stick together. We have to do this together. It's kind of, too clingy. If that's your style, like that's really what I learned. Like you have to figure out what you like. You have to communicate that. You have to be really open, and then find people who like that or who can like help you to get the best experience together or apart. But like in that experience, you just have to be open. I think travel is one of the best relationship testers, regardless of platonic or romantic. It's like if you just want to be serious about somebody, travel with them and see what happens when you run into problems or how you just naturally fit. Because sometimes you just want to just go without makeup when you've never dared to do that with your partner or whatever. Or like you hadn't shown your weird side, but then you're jet lagged, you're stressed, and you cannot control yourself as much. And like if they still like that side of you, that's amazing.
Yeah, that is something where, I mean, both sides offer so much like growth and challenge to grow. Is like when you're by yourself, like, especially if you don't really know yourself too, you get a lot of like, learning to trust your intuition and like finding what, style suits you and just like putting yourself out there and being courageous. But then in a partnership or like not even romantic, but just, working with another person, it's that like compromise, which I do struggle with too. Like I remember when my mom, I booked a trip to Kenya, which unfortunately got canceled with COVID, and I told my mom about it, or like the pandemic, and she wanted to go because that's been her life dream, to like go to Africa and see elephants. Wow. And she's like, "Can I come with?" And I was like, "Oh," like it was hard because I knew it was her life thing, but I was like, oh man, I feel, because like I was so comfortable traveling by myself and love to just do my own thing, and that recognition of like, oh, if I'm traveling with someone, are we doing things together? Do I like have to I kind of told her that too. I was like, well, I just want to let you know that there will be things that I probably want to do by myself and just like have my space. And she was fine with that. We ended up never actually traveling. She went by herself and like had a wonderful time.
Oh, she did. Amazing.
Yeah, and that's where I think it was like awesome, because some people, like maybe traveling is not for everyone, which I'm just like, maybe I just haven't traveled yet, but also like, you do you. I'm not going to force my beliefs on you, but for her, like that was her first time traveling solo, and she had such a wonderful time. And I feel like there was so much of like, yeah, I have to travel with like my father, so her husband, and do like the whole doing a pack unit and traveling, where she went by herself and she was like, I want to do this and I don't care, I'm going to do it for me. And I was like, yes,
love that. Yeah, I just never told for it.
To do that. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, oh, go ahead.
No, I forgot my first.
No problem. But that's where like with traveling with a partner too, or whoever, I think it is still nice to have that, like, I'm gonna do me, you do you. And that's the balance of just trying to like when you're so like, I know who I am, and then merging who you are in a relationship and still maintaining your sense of autonomy and individuality when coming into like a partnership, or, when you're with friends, or like not to sacrifice yourself, but that, I'm learning the joys of compromise too in communication.
Yeah, exactly. Or then you can just figure out stuff you both like doing together. You can be on that journey when you're open to it and you're not like, I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to chill on my bed, like in a resort. Like you need to, like, you learn a lot about people's priorities. And sure, it can be temporary thing that, like, in that moment they needed the thing. But also, like, you can read people, like, how much they see, like, okay, this is my need. I need to set the boundary. Or is this like, this is my need. I'm just going to do it regardless of whatever you want or you need. And then, like, you learn about people if you're open to it, because people will show you their real self pretty far in advance. But especially when you're like in the honeymoon stage or something, or like even with friendships, when you're like so amazed by them and like everybody's on their good behavior, like travel can show you things when things are not going smoothly, or you can learn from one another. Like I do like sometimes traveling with friends, or just taking them on day trips through their own town and just opening up their horizons, or just, igniting that kind of curiosity back into them, because, we always get so complacent. And that way I also like help them see things differently, or, ask some questions I didn't consider. Or, even if I take those people I find in hostels, some of them were like completely new and they didn't know their way around. I was like, oh, I'm just going to take you, I'm going to adopt you for the day, and I'm going to show you this. Right. And so, like, you can pass things forward. Or I used to be such a type A traveler, like super like specific about the timing, about what needed to be seen, like super maximizing everything, and then stressed out everybody. And I learned to be the opposite, like super chill, not doing any research, and then like stuff blowing up in my face. And so from all of these experiences I've learned, I like sharing them with people. That's why I started my travel blogs and I wrote my books and stuff like that, just to help other people not having to experience that, but also showing them that you can do it. You can go travel by yourself as a woman. The world's as scary as is anyway, so like might as well do the best of it, and like develop certain things, or just be mindful of things, do your research, so you're still safe in a way that you can have control over. And then you find other solo women, and then you might want to hang out with them. You want to ask them for advice or tips or hear their stories. And then you develop this kind of community all over the world. Like, so many people I met along the way, I still my friends, and I met them in the most random locations. Like, I still remember I met a couple of girls in Seoul, and we got along really, really well. And then I traveled back to Japan, and what do I know? I was in a hostel. I was just like walking around with my Game Boy because I'm a nerd. And I was like, I hear those voices. I remember those voices. And I just looked into this room, and there they were. I was like, hello again. Later. Like, the world is small. And so that's fun. Like, I've met people in New Zealand that I then visited in like their countries, where like, they can visit me in Germany when I'm home and stuff like that. So it's a great way to connect with people, and then also learn about their cultures, learn about them. And, even if you are stuck at home, if you can't travel, because it's very privilege is expensive to a degree, especially now after the pandemic. Places like TikTok, to circle back to that, they really help you learn about other people, like hear other people's accents and way of using words, even if you just learn the differences between the American and the British English vocabulary, like stuff like that. Or, like certain appliances are different in different countries. Like, I was so fascinated in Sweden. I wrote an entire blog post about doorknobs. They found no end. They were so different. I was like, oh, that's fascinating to tell people about this. Right? I was like doing my little anthropological studies. I'm like, look at the recycling bins. They're so different. Let's write a blog post. Like super random stuff.
I actually am fascinated. Well, because like for me being in like I went and got a degree in design, so it's like there's a lot of reasonings to those choices too, which fascinate me because they have to do with like either psychology or just like how humans operate, the ergonomics. So I love understanding that sort of stuff. Like, oh my gosh, I forgot the color, but there's a specific color of pink that actually like they
Yes.
exist in prisons. Yeah, that like really aggravates people. And I'm just like, that's so fascinating. Or like, what? Because I went to school, we learned about color psychology, and red and yellow are the two colors that are most commonly used in fast food restaurants because they help to actually stimulate your appetite and they symbolize like motivation and like just movement. So that's kind of the whole like motive of fast food is like get in, get out, and that's where it's like all of these colors kind of come into play in branding. So I just love understanding that. So I would probably be fascinated reading about like, trash bins and design and all that.
Oh no, I find that so fascinating. And even you mentioned like McDonald's and stuff, like when they changed their branding to more like earthy colors and changed the entire like seating to be more comfortable so they can say for McCafe, stuff like that. Like there's I love the psychology. And then you go to different countries and then you just see like one of the first things I always do in a new country is go to the supermarket and just look at everything. Like I don't know what it says mostly, but I'm just like, look at all of these milks. Or like look at all of these drinks. And then sometimes I accidentally grab like an alcoholic drink because I thought it's pretty. I don't drink alcohol, so like when I drink, I'm like, oh god, oh, I hate the taste of alcohol. Somebody else drink that for me. Okay, bye. Like in Japan, it's like they all look so pretty, but they have this little stamp. Until you know that stamp, you might actually grab the wrong ones. Or like just specific festivities when they have specific foods out, or like little like when you can like eat snacks and then you can just try the samples and stuff like that. It's so cool to like find out also about the history of certain foods, or especially with Japan, like every city and every region has their own specialty. They're very proud of it. And there's maps just showing the different delicacies. So you can travel just for the food. I'm like, yes, they get it. So you can have different kinds of like sushi in different towns, and they're also very proud of it. It's like, you can't just go to like Osaka and tell them that you like the Hiroshima okonomiyaki much more. Like, oh, that's bad, which I do, but don't tell anybody. Yeah, it's stuff like that. It's just so cool. And then to learn how people like consume. Like I was in Kyoto and I thought like I had to use chopsticks for everything. So I was very overzealous, and I was sitting there with my Chinese friend who were like, I was introducing her to Gyudon, which I'm like obsessed with, but just from Sukiya, just this one brand. The other ones I don't like, but just specific one. And so I was getting my very specific bowl, and I was like eating every rice corn like with my chopsticks. I was like, that was like crazy, just like. And then this lady from like a couple seats over, she was staring at us, and I was just like, maybe because I'm the most obvious foreigner and like nobody else like foreign. And then she just at the end she was like, I just have to come over and I just have to say this is fascinating. I'm like, what is? Like I was like a Japanese person just talks to you that's like unheard of. And she's like, yeah, I was impressed that you ate this with your chopsticks. Usually we eat a spoon. I was like, I was trying so hard. It's like, but you got everything. I'm like, I did get every rice corns. It's like, maybe next time you use the spoon, okay? I'm like, noted.
Well, yeah, that's what traveling really, or even TikTok, just like being open to new perspectives, new ways of being, just like based on the culture. Like even in the U.S., even though it's a country, there's so many different cultures. And I travel. I have a camper van that I'm currently recording this in, and so I've traveled to like so many different parts of the country, and it's really like opened my perspective because unfortunately in the US too there's a lot of like turmoil like politically and idea wise, and it's just I think it's refreshing to go to these places to actually fully understand like maybe why that is the way like you view things or think or eat or whatever, because all of that changes like geographically, that food wise, just like the environment. I don't know if this is true or not, but so I drove to California, and Californian drivers are like absolutely crazy in my opinion. I'm just like, they're so entitled, and I was like, oh my gosh. Then I went to Texas. Texas drivers are also crazy, but for another reason. And then I was like, there's got to be like some theme here. So I looked up like the most fatalities for like cars, and the top 3 states are California, Texas, and Florida. All warm states.
Of course.
Like, yeah, but I was like, there must be something with like heat making people cranky and like irresponsible drivers. But I don't know. It's like there's so much that affects like our viewpoints in the culture, and even in like Japan where it's all islands, that like, that's so different based on,
Mhm.
each specific island. So that like always fascinates me. And I guess too, especially like if again, my opinion, if you have just like a very rigid way of viewing, like I'm right, this is the way,
Oh yeah.
it like there's so many like a lot of people probably have that, and that's where causes like the rifts of just like no, my way's right, no, my way's right.
Oh yeah.
And just to like understand those different perspectives of like I can see your point, I can see your point. That's where I at least like find religion. That's like the huge thing that so many like we've had wars over for centuries
Mhm.
about religion. And like I take a step back and I look and I'm like, okay, yeah, like monotheism. It's like, okay, you have Allah, you have God, you have maybe this person, like, and I just see like the similarities, and it's just
Yeah.
like maybe you all have versions of the truth, or like you're talking about the same thing and you're just like articulating it in a different sort of way. So
Right.
just opening your perspective does so much.
Exactly. Or then you can just be like, you know what? I don't know. Like, I just don't know. I let you do your thing, but you don't get to dictate me my thing. And then I can like send it to other people who are like, okay, we're having an argument. We can talk about it. Sometimes there's no actual intention to like reach a point. You just want people to believe you, like to magically get it. And then you have to be like, yeah, this is not leading anywhere. And so like the more you travel, the more you realize everything's super arbitrary. Like we're humans are just weird creatures. There's a lot of stuff that actually is shared and similar and that I like to focus on. And then I just learn out of curiosity. And I know I will fumble things. I will like make cultural faux pas and stuff. But just having that willingness, people know that, people usually are nice about it, especially if you're a foreigner and you don't know the language, you fumble words or you say funny things. Like that time I went to France and my friend asked me to order some specific baked good in a bakery, and I went in there asking for cucumber, and I was very confident about it. I was like, "Give me a cucumber," and everybody just stared at me. Nobody wanted to help me, or it was just one letter. I still don't know which word I was supposed to like. I forgot, but it was just one letter I butchered, and I changed the entire meaning, and nobody was like, "You're just gonna let her fumble. Like we're not gonna help her out." And I went back to my friend. I was like, They don't have any of that." And she's like, "They
Yeah.
didn't." Like, but I was like, "I'm asking for this thing." She's like, "That's cucumber." I'm like, oh, so like that was embarrassing. I didn't want to go back. I was like, "You going out? I can't show my face again."
Yeah, traveling does humble you, or just like the different perspectives of like, oh,
Um,
this is how you say something, or oh, I've been doing like, and that's where,
mhm.
like you said, we're human, and that's where I try to like have that perspective of just like empathy and understanding of like, we're all just trying our best for the
Yeah.
most part, and to not be so harsh on people, like especially that's been my biggest fear. Like I'm not a language person. I sometimes f up even like the English language, which is like my only tongue. So I'm just like, I that is one of my biggest fears is to like get something wrong. But I remember too, like especially because America has so many different like countries coming in and different languages being spoke. And from at least my perspective, like I'm not going to be like, oh my God, that person like said something the wrong way. Like if someone talks in an accent or like fumbles and is trying to speak
Mhm.
like broken English. So I'm like, why is it so much harder for me? Like, I'm sure there's people that also understand if I try to say something in, their language, it's like, you are trying and I
Yeah.
understand, like, you didn't grow up
Mhm.
here, you weren't here for 12 years. So that's at least like the mentality I try to have too with just like the understanding.
No, it's so true. And then you can like extend that to other parts. Like sometimes, I used to be such a stickler for correct grammar. I was like, you didn't do the apostrophe S, like this is a possessive S, like, you didn't write your the correct way. I was like so rabid about it. Like even with my own text, like I would just like read them and read them and read them to like avoid any typos because that could have been interpreted as being I don't know, whatever, lazy or incompetent or whatever. And how dare they? How dare I? And so I would just get off like like the language police online. There's so many people who like will question your intelligence as soon as you make some typos. And then when you realize you step back, like, you could be a sleepy human. You could be like, been working so much that you get like blind to your own stuff, which is very common. Or you could also have like dyslexia. You maybe have like problems with your hands. You do not know anything about the person. It doesn't say anything about their intelligence. You just are ableist, right? And so, like, the more you realize that you know nothing and that you don't have to be like giving everybody grace and be like excusing everybody for everything, but you can also be like, I don't know the story. I could ask for the story, or I could just move on. And that's easier said than done. But like, the more you do that, the more you realize that with travel, like, oh my God, I made all of these blunders in Japan. Like, am I a terrible person? No. I just did stupid things. I might have known better, but now I know. And like, you just learn as you go. Like, you fumble, like, you're learning a new language, you're learning a new culture. And then when you come back, you all have to assimilate back to your own culture, but you're changed. And that's difficult. And so when you realize all of these things that you've misinterpreted through various means, like even through cultures, like I had so many instances where I was like, they hate me, like they're being like this way and that way. And then I just essentially had unintentionally offended them. So obviously they would have treated me that way. I was like, oh, that's their story they told themselves about this incident. If I had been able to communicate in the language, I could have explained myself and like avoided misunderstanding, but because they didn't talk, or maybe that wasn't the culture, like how to address conflict, all of these different things, you have to constantly bridge over all of these things. And then the same in your home country, especially in your home country, people just expect things of you. And those are also arbitrary, and they could be familiar, like just your family has these kinds of notions, or they could be like from your trauma, like coping mechanisms, or that could be, there's a thousand things that could make people do the things that they've been doing in that moment. And who are you to know? So the only thing you can do is work on yourself, work on your communication, ask about it. If they won't volunteer, then maybe you can't move forward, and that's just what it is.
Yeah, and that's where it's like you really don't know, because like for me, for example, and like I know we haven't really touched on this, but like ADHD, I remember, well, one, that I always thought I was different, and like, maybe in some sense, if we're comparing to like, I don't even want to say a normal brain. Yeah,
No,
I hate it. I hate to say like typical, because I'm like, I hate like a lot of people have ADHD now, and I'm like, how typical is like that? So
exactly.
just a different way, but yeah, I don't want to even say like I've learned to love this, but I think when it's like society has deemed it as something that's like, you should be shamed of, or you're like, oh, something's wrong with you. So one of my like quirks is that I will mix up words when I get on that ADHD rant, and like my brain is just like, ugh, I will mix up two totally different words that sound similar, or I will the new word that is like from two words that mean the same thing.
Oh,
and yes, and I just like I know for some people who are very like grammatically correct, they're just like, no, no, no. And I've just learned to like, I got so much shame from it, because like, especially in school, they're like, no. But now I've learned to love that part of myself. I'm like, you know what, this is quirky, and honestly, I should come up with my own dictionary, because like they do the new words are invented every day. So that's something too, where it's like, with a lot of the shame or the just like being different and the faults and all of that, just like embracing and being more compassionate on yourself too. Because like you were saying, oh, I did these things in Japan that was like a faux pas, and now, I could either shame myself, or I could say, hey, I'm human, I'm learning. And that's something that I've had to do, and honestly, like, it's harder for me to like, have grace on myself than like another person. And I think that's just maybe a societal thing. We're just like much harder, and we internalize a lot, rather than if my friend had the same sort of situation, I'd be like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, it happens, but I did it. I was like, why? Like,
right.
Just, yeah, learning those things too. Like, we're humans, and going through this journey called life is messy. And sometimes that messiness can be like really beautiful, like an abstract painting. And sometimes it's like,
yeah, just a blob of color.
Yeah,
like turning to brown.
That was the visual I was thinking, where you mix the colors too much and you're like, oh, now it looks barf.
Yeah, exactly. Just a barf. But they could also be like art, high art, highbrow. Put a banana next to it.
yeah, however you perceive it, that's the thing. We all view the world differently.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that is absolutely it. So how did you get started on being in a van? Like that is like a thing that I haven't done because I don't drive. But it's like such an ingenious way. You don't have to look for any accommodation. You can like just rock up anywhere where you're like allowed to camp and park. There's limitations, I'm sure. But like you're on your own, but also like if you travel solo, I feel like that's also scary. Like that's what I'm telling myself. I don't know. Just,
Well, that's like the whole thing with almost similar to traveling solo. You're like, it's scary, and then you do it, and you're like, oh,
right?
you know, stuff happens all the time. So yeah, my van journey is interesting. Like from an early age have loved tiny homes, like the tiny homes on wheels that like seem to be really popular too in New Zealand and Australia. I've seen so many awesome ones come from there. But I just love them, and I was like, I want to do that one day, but I just kind of don't know where, and I put that like intention out there. And then the pandemic happened, and I got let go of my job, and within that like time frame, so much had shifted for me. I came crumbling down. Like I lost my job, my relationship that I was in ended. I decided to start my own business, and then with like everything happening too and the uncertainty, and especially with traveling, because I love traveling, and I was like, well, I don't see, me doing international travel for a while. I was like, you know what? Maybe now's the time to try van life and to see where that goes. And this way too, I can travel like in the US and still like get out when, everyone is in lockdown, like go out into nature and just like be away. Cause I'm also very energetically sensitive. And like with lockdowns in the cities, I could feel it all. And I'm like, I need to get out of like a very high density area because it is not good for my nervous system. So that's kind of how I built the van, and that sort of manifested itself really beautifully because I was hunting and I didn't really know what to look for, and this van came along, and it like is such a like I do think I manifested it because it has everything I wanted. It was the year I wanted. It had all the features I wanted, and kind of like a fun little irony is, so I'm an interior designer, and this is actually an old painter's van. Like a paint company used to own that. And I just love that. So like we're sort of in the same industry, like, and now the interior designer has a van that was a painter's van. I don't know. My brain was like, this is the van. It's meant to be. And yeah, then I went through this whole journey of learning how to build it. I've never built a van before or anything. I didn't even know what some power tools were. And my friends were like, oh, you just get this. I'm like, I had to Google what it was. I felt so embarrassed. I was like, I don't know what a hacksaw is. I don't know what a monkey wrench is and all of this stuff. But that's the whole, like, when you start off not knowing and you just do it and you overcome that fear of like, I don't know what to do. And it's so overwhelming. Like breaking it down into like small chunks, that helped me. YouTube videos saved my life, just like watching other people and people who are so passionate about van life. There's a wealth of knowledge out there. And then, yeah, I just started traveling, and there was some worry about being a solo female who was traveling, but like with the international travels I did, I was like, well, that might just be my perception, and I'm sure there's certain things like, yes, use your better judgment. I'm not going to go to like the sketchy part of town and park my van where there's like, oh, I'm getting the bad vibes. And there's just like things you look out for. I don't advertise it. I'm not like on social media being like, I'm here, pin location, send to everyone. So it's like, there's just things that you use your common sense for. But it has been really nice and just like that sense of freedom, but it also comes with its challenges. I will say that too, because van life is very romanticized. Everyone's like, oh my God, I want to travel and be like waking up to a mountain. The percentage of that is like actually like that's a whole fake Instagram sort of like reality check that we need, because majority of the time from my experience you're like sleeping in like store parking lots and at gas stations and rest stops, and it's not that ideal picturesque. And even with the picturesque, you're still dealing with like Wi-Fi connection issues and just a whole bunch of other things. So I would say if you have the inclination, do it. It's so rewarding, but also like I had to kind of get rid of the romanticizing aspect too of it and be like, these are the realities. This is stuff people don't tell you. But I wouldn't trade that.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of limitations. Like you have to do some sort of research to know like potential gas stations, like backup plans, like can you go grocery shopping in those areas? Do they have enough equipment? Maybe it's suddenly a different climate. Can you get more like warmer jackets or whatever? And, like plan things up. You can't just like with any travel, you can't just hike up random mountains being like completely unprepared. Like that kind of thing. It's just a different kind of set list of what to take into consideration, and then you have to have some kind of car skills, I assume, like to fix things up when you break down or there's some issue. Like what I learned, like in Australia, like I said, I don't drive. I have a license which I never use, but like what I learned in Australia is when you have like a 4-wheel drive, which is common for the outback, because you want to be like on the clock. But if you go to one of the beaches, like there's Fraser Island, the biggest sandy beach like island in the world, as a peninsula in the world, and so like the entire island is just like super fine, crumbly sand. Like there's no actual soil, nothing solid. And so if you want to drive with your car, you can, but you need to like take out a little bit of the air from your wheels. Otherwise, you will get stuck somehow. I don't know the mechanics of it, but a lot of people forget that and then they get stuck. But like that's one thing. Like how would you know if you didn't do the research, right?
Yeah, and that's what I like. It really is a lifestyle, I would say. Like you are trading some things. Like, the most like common question I get asked too is like, where do you go to the bathroom, or like, where do you shower, and things like that. And honestly, that's like the least of my concerns because yeah, it's like, where am I gonna park tonight, and like, let me plan my route. And do I have enough water if I'm going out in the wilderness where, maybe I am for a week and I need some fresh water? Do I have enough? So there's just like different priorities with it. And it might not be for everyone like something I realized too, with traveling, I love it. I love that freedom, but I also am someone that loves stability. And that's what I found challenging, whereas like that's not really a bad thing. It's like, yes, you're on the road, you're free, you can change up your location. But for me, I like having maybe a set space that I'm like, okay, I feel really grounded. I have a home base to return to. Which is kind of why, like, and then I ended up meeting up, my current partner, and we ended up getting a place together because it was like, it's nice to have that stability and that grounding to return to. And I get that's maybe not like, for everyone in terms of like financially available, but there are some things that you just realize when you put yourself in those different situations. And like, this is a different perspective for me of like, I love it, but I know too that I really need grounding, especially for my business. Like I can do stuff on the road, but I get so much more done if I'm like have a set space where I'm just like, let me just like work. And that's why I go to coffee shops a lot if I'm traveling, because it's that environment of like everyone's on their computers that I'm like, all right, I'm in that zone. Yeah. And that's what I talk about a lot with my clients too, because like dealing with environments, I kind of know how they shape us. And I built my van out to be more of a cozy, like you can see it's all wood. So it has it's a cozy log cabin, which doesn't support necessarily like doing and motivation. It's more of like, I just want to restore my energy, which this definitely does.
Nice. Yeah, I'm also very susceptible to the environment. Like you said, like I can go to different places in the world and I feel something about it. Like either like I feel like super energized and like this is great, this is a great thing, or some places just make me really sad or maybe introspective. And there's this energy I'm picking up. Maybe it's just certain times of the year, or maybe it's just at one time, and then next time I visit, it's different. But also, just like you said, going to a coffee shop, I'm very selective on the type of coffee shop I go to. Like, needs to have food I like that I can get in, but they don't need to nag me constantly for being on my laptop. And I'm not like that customer who constantly orders something, makes me feel guilty. But also, it's visually stimulating enough that it feels cozy. So I can just like take in things, just think, or be blank in my head if that ever happens. But also, like, there's enough people working, so I'm not the only weird one out. Because that's what I find, like, in Germany, for instance, I can't just go to a coffee shop and, like, work on my laptop. That's kind of weird, because people don't do that. So I'm like, where am I supposed to go? To the library? Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm also very conscious. And then, like you said, also the colors. It's just, the effect you need on that day. Maybe you need stimulating blue. Maybe you need more calming stuff, or you need something energizing like orange or whatever. Like, if you just tune into yourself, maybe even selectively like mark that when you research, that's also interesting. And I love that you do that with your client.
Yeah, that is like, because we are all so different, and like
Yeah.
that is the first like thing I often do is like learning about yourself, because I not all of us are very in tune, and especially when we like put that outside of ourselves and like talk about our spaces, like what colors do I like? What do I need in a space in order to feel like stimulated or grounded or restored? Because we all have different preferences, because we're all so different. So that's like the first step I like to go with clients is like, well, let's figure out, what sort of things you are attracted to, and like what does a calm space mean. And there's so many ways you can do that. Like I love to use astrology and more of like the energetics and feng shui. But it's even just like, I don't know. It's I kind of like to think about it with like people who, whisper to horses or dogs or things like that. I feel like I'm a room whisperer where like people will send me like inspiration images, and I can kind of pinpoint to them like, okay, I can kind of see, based on this, you're probably liking like these colors or this sort of texture, or even in just like the openness of the space. So that's the whole journey of learning about yourself too. But yeah, just knowing and listening to yourself and your intuition and being self-reflective. If the world could be more self-reflective and introspective, we would solve so many problems.
Agreed. Absolutely. I just wish that was taught in schools, like mindfulness class, everyday meditation, please.
Yeah, that's I know. It's like I know that there's some more private or like alternative schools, and I think that more people might be doing homesteading, or not homesteading, hopefully homesteading, but homeschooling too in the US at least. Or I don't know if that's just because it's, yeah, like what TikTok shows me, and I definitely have an algorithm and a micro bubble of like, oh yeah, all these home schoolers and steaders and things like that, because that is definitely where I want to be. But yeah, I think too, we're just learning, like, 10 years ago, people never talked about mental health. People never talked about ADHD. And now it's like ADHD is such a common topic. And like you talk about going to see a therapist, like you go to brunch on the weekends where it's like, it's no big deal. But 10 years ago, there was so much stigma around it. So I kind of wonder too if that's going to just be like more, where we are talking about mindfulness and we are like just being more introspective in this. I know, right? That is the hope.
I know. Oh, I've seen it a lot in my spaces, but again, it could just be my bubble. But overall, I think it's much more accessible to some extent. If you wanted to find out more, you don't have to buy all of the best-selling books and like invest so much money. It's like out there. There's so many resources, so many people to connect, or like groups to hang out with. Or if you just wanted to like a yoga session with a group online, or just do like a cacao ceremony, or like, tarot reading or whatever. There's so many outlets you can like explore and learn more about yourself through, instead of just taking that thing as gospel. That's always like dangerous, but it just really helps you try things out in different ways when you have not really learned who you are, because you've always denied that part of yourself, that self-expression through school, when you've been put into that mold. And regardless of your neurotype, we always try, like, that's what school does. It just teaches you to like fit in and like be quiet and just perform. That's that's the core idea behind it. When it started industrialization, all of that, and still like they're trying to shift so much, but the core of it, it's still not very inclusive. They're working on it, I think. But I still love seeing like the changes in the newer generations, like Gen Z or Gen Alpha. Like what I see on TikTok gives me so much hope. Like I would have never dared to say a lot of those things. I'm like, damn, I'm like both scared but also in awe.
Yeah, that's where it's like, it's so cheesy when people are like, children are the future, but I'm like, well, they kind of are. And just seeing like the generations, like I feel like you're just always improving, or at least that's like my mindset is, parents like want, better than what they had. And I feel like that's even in generations where we're just doing better because we're thinking about more of these things and we're talking about more of these issues. And we're just seeing, like, what doesn't work anymore. There's a lot of things crumbling and systems breaking, and that can be scary, but, like, yeah, being into tarot and energy and, like, the death and rebirth cycle, I'm like, yeah, transition isn't always easy. Like, you kinda need some of the stuff to happen in order to, like, rebuild and to, like, change for the better.
Absolutely. And so that's why I love social media, because you can hear those stories. You can like have people tell their experience. Like, I was treated like this as a child. Like when people say like, I hit my kids, it didn't damage me. And then you just like talk, like hear them talk about their experience and like how numb they are to things. And you're like, you're sure about that? Let's go see a therapist. Right. And there's like,
Yeah.
like, oh, I was gentle parented. And then you like, I listened to this one account. I forgot the name. But it's just all about like how her parents like gentle parented her before that was a thing, and how that affects her kids and her way of like seeing the world, interacting with people. And it's just so refreshing to hear those sides, which I've never been like exposed to. So you can find your models, or you can feed your curiosity on different things and see the what ifs, or just sharing your story and see if somebody resonates, because there most likely will be a lot of people who resonate. And that's just so healing to be heard and seen that way and to be validated. And especially if you want to heal like your generational trauma, you can't just expect your parents to be suddenly like apologetic and like, woke about the entire thing so days. Because nobody's perfect, right? But it's
Mhm.
just you have to start with yourself. You have to be responsible as an adult for your own ways of acting and like working on yourself, and just not just even retrospectively or looking at the past, but like in the here and now, into the future, who do I want to be? What are my ideals right now? If I could change something, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? And then that will also be a domino effect on other people who didn't see that. And they're like, oh, I liked that. I want to adopt that into my life. I want to act like that. I want to be more around those people. Or, like if you've been abused and didn't realize that, then, hear other stories, or like hear a loving couple stories. You're like, oh, that's possible. Like some things like that. It's just, yeah, the world is so big, so beautiful.
Yes, it really is, and, I mean, yeah, you're with the generational trauma thing too, like, that's something like also having grace and compassion. Like, I understand now, like, some of the stuff my parents did, while it affected me, like, I can see, from their maybe generational trauma, like
Mhm.
how that influenced, and not holding it against them, because it's not like they probably were consciously like, oh yeah, I'm doing this because it's going to negatively impact my child. But it's like we're just constantly learning, and that's the thing too. I'm so curious about, like, in 50 years or something, like looking back in like 2020 and just being like, wow, they did things so like archaic back then, or just like I
Yeah.
always like we're moving forward. Like back in the day on the 50s, like cigarettes were prescribed for like at doctors, and it's like I wonder how, like, and now we know
Mhm.
obviously, so I'm curious of what things will come from what we're doing right now even.
Oh no, me too. Like I often wonder that too. Or just like even when they show these videos to like Gen Z kids, like give them a tape recorder and they don't know what that is. Like they just make up all kinds of weird things. You're just like, am I that old? I don't know. Like like all
Right.
these little things or words, or when they tell you like, oh, anything, like it's just about your age, or like or like the things like if you, I don't know, like 23 years ago, like the 80s are farther away than the next 50s or something. You're like, wait, what? The 80s were just like last decade,
That is, yes, I have that reality check where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that was actually a while ago." And I'm an old soul. I love vintage things. I love like history. So in some ways, I kind of embrace like being born in the 1900s and like all of that.
you know? Yeah, like, the joke was like when you don't have your passport or like your ID and they see just a 19, or like you pull out like your video mart card or whatever, and they're like, yeah, you're old.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's something too where like I don't get. Well, yeah, I used to be flattered, and now like no one IDs me, and I'm just like, oh, have I really? Just like, do I look old now?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, people always ask me for ID, like way into my 20s. I was like, no, it's just good or bad. I don't know. I know nobody ever asked me for anything. I'm like, Look at my face again. Look at it.
I know. I think that's like a whole thing that we as a society go through is when you're in your early 20s, when you get ID'd, you're just like, do I really look like underage? And now you're just like, do I really not look like, do I look old or something?
I know, it's been wild. That's so stupid.
Yeah. Also, again, I'm sorry, your video froze.
Come on now.
Okay, it's back to normal. I was dealing with it for a while because I didn't want to interrupt our flow.
Yeah, and that's okay. It recorded hopefully on my end. I could see me move. I don't know.
Yeah, I hope so too. But I guess you'll find out.
I'll find out. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, how do we segue from there?
I don't know. I mean, I also I'm conscious of like the time too. I don't know. Like you said, sometimes you go on forever, but I know we're in like an hour and 32, so I'm like, it's up to you if you want to continue down the flow or not.
I know. I think like I'm running out of energy a little bit, so
I understand. And I do have a day to get, moving forward some things later in my day as well.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I'm so curious to see like what will stick around with like the social media that's ever flowing, but also what we will make as a society, especially if like politics wants to get involved and ban TikTok, like it already has in one state. I forgot which one, so that's bad. But just like generally, it's such a tumultuous time, especially being millennials. It's just like constantly life-changing events, like left and right. Like what's next, right? So like forest fires in like June in New York, like, yeah, okay, what's next? You know, the 23 bingo cards getting really full.
I know. Yeah, and that is a perspective too where I struggle because like as a millennial, we've grown up with so much, just like trauma and horrific events too, where you're like, no wonder why we're like depressed as a generation and all of these things and anxious and all of that. And I do still really want to try to focus on like having optimism and hope. And it's hard when you get, like all of the stuff happening. And the 2023 bingo card is like, what? That was not on my like new list. But I like there is that sense of humans, at least I hope, it seems like when we really get down to the wire, like people are, that's when people will make those huge pushes and changes. And I think as a society too, with the younger generations, like they are giving me hope in the sense of like, let's make change, especially because a lot, millennials, Gen Z, we're not that past generation. We kind of, we've grown up with technology and that has opened our perspective more, I think, just being like, I can travel to, a different country and learn about it. I can have a conversation with someone around the world and see like a different way of life. And I think that perspective has really helped in these younger generations too, where I think we're just more open-minded and understanding. And I think that's going to play out, hopefully, fingers crossed, in like a lot of the changes for the positive in our, society.
Absolutely. There's so much hope. And it also shows how creative we can be and how resourceful we can be. Like, if you want to just start like a crowdfunding thing, you can have people from anywhere in the world give you money for, a disaster or whatever, an operation, or, you can see really people be invested in you, or you can like be charitable in your work and reach much more people because you can connect to them online, where formerly you would have had to go like to the men's club and work your way up the corporate ladder. Like now you can just have so much opportunity, so many ways to connect with people, to do your own thing. You could just be like a hermit artist on the internet making art that resonates with people, but you don't actually have to go outside. You can make your own online gallery, never like exhibiting in any physical space. Like there's so many other ways. You can make music, you can make your own movies. Like the options are so endless. So you can collaborate, you can like go with your own flow, you can change things up, you can break the molds, because there really is like no limitations really with the internet. It is so fruitful, also scary, but it's just absolutely like exciting to see where it's going.
Yeah, it's definitely, well, I don't want to say definitely. I view it as a tool. Any tool can
Hmm.
be used positively or negatively.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, definitely how you use it, and you are in control of that, at least, with monitoring what you see and not, and how much, you want to let affect you.
Yeah, exactly. Or like how you take things with a grain of salt, especially with the AI moving in, like, distorting facts and images and stuff. So, but as always, like we always have to be media trained. And like when I grew up with like the dial-in like internet thing, like I didn't know about like all of these scammers. I didn't know about like firewalls and all of these things. Just like when you burn CDs, and like maybe you would be like found online if you torrented a film or whatever. Like, like there's all of these things, and like, criminals will advance as you will advance. And just the more you are in this space learning and listening to other people and having them tell you tips on how to be safe online, the more you can like be smart about it. It's when you just refuse to learn and grow, it's when you get more vulnerable. I think that's it. You can't just like rebel against it because it's just going to move regardless of what you think.
Yeah, it's really, that's the thing is like I'm not great with technology, I'll admit it, but I want, like, at least it's refreshing to know in some ways that it keeps evolving, and you kind of either have to keep up with it, or you will, I don't want to say become obsolete, but that is something where it's like, my, older generations don't know how to use certain pieces of equipment. And in some ways, I'm like, I don't want to be so dependent on technology, but also I appreciate the like push towards like using my mind still, and like trying to learn new things, because that's doesn't even have to be technology. Just learning new skills can be a lifelong pursuit. And once you stop learning, it's like you're really, in my mind, slip off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. It's just, yeah, just don't stagnate in your life. Just always be flexible. And it just also helps you neuroplasticity. It's like win-win.
Yes, exactly. Got to keep the
Yeah,
brain intact.
exactly. Oh my gosh, I'm loving this conversation. But is there anything we haven't touched upon that you really want to share? Because we've touched upon so many different topics. You could go on and on and on.
Honestly, like, yes and no, but I know if we did, it would just be probably like we would never stop talking.
Another tangent.
Yes, I know, especially with like my ADHD and just being very passionate about certain things. But no, I feel like we touched upon so many different topics today that I feel very full and complete.
I love it. Me too. That was such a fun conversation. I always love talking about travel. If I can, I will always bring it up. And to me, it's just the biggest teacher. It's just the best way to connect people and to challenge yourself and grow and just, yeah, get humbled. Like you said earlier, it is really nice because then you just question your life, question yourself for good and for bad. And you're like, this is what I want now. This is what I don't want. This is what I want to leave behind. This is what I'm going to adopt. And I think that's something we can take into our day to day life where we be like checking in with ourselves much more and getting out of autopilot and maybe even making more attempts at connecting with people outside of our bubbles, be it online or in like real spaces, trying, exotic, I don't want to say that, like foreign cuisine that you might not seek out naturally, but it just reminds you of a place, or then maybe you find other people who like it and like can bond over that, even though it's your home and you thought you know everybody. There's always little adventures to be had everywhere.
Absolutely. And that's, yeah, beauty about traveling. Again, if, people who don't travel, like, and fear stopping you, don't.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done, but as soon as you do it, it just evaporates. Things just fall into place. It is so fascinating. I always see that in myself when I'm like at home between travels, especially if I'm there longer. This fear just creeps in and everything feels hard and difficult and I have to plan it out. And then as soon as I like step on the plane, it's just easy. Not easy, not like in a way that things just work out magically because they never do when you travel. But it's just
Mhm.
is more in the flow. You take things as you go, especially if you don't hold on to what you think it's supposed to be like, or hold on to the schedule, and then things just don't work out, and you have a little hissy fit. you know.
Yeah,
It teaches you, to be humble and flexible.
absolutely. And just like, yeah, you push yourself more because, like, what else are you gonna do? Like, freak out in a foreign country? You just, I don't know. You do go with that flow.
Yeah, exactly. And then you become more instead of problem focused, you're like solution oriented. That's what it did to me. Like now
Yeah.
you throw a problem at me, let me figure out a solution. I can like spiral into more problems. That's easy. But what about I just fix this real quick because I don't want to have like no bad at night in the middle of nowhere, you know?
Yeah. So you will take care of things, yeah, and like that's it shows you what you're made of in some ways too.
Exactly. That's a great like final sentence. I love that. Great rep. Shows what you're made of. Go travel if you can. Even if it's
Yeah.
even if it's your hometown. Like, it doesn't have to be this extravagant, elusive, privileged thing. There's so many different ways.
Yeah, just oh gosh, I don't want to like keep on the tangent, but yeah, even just like a weekend getaway.
Yes. Like even that can totally change when you do it by yourself for the first time. That's what people wrote to me after they saw me travel. And they're like, I could never. I'm like, yes, you can do it. And then they did it like after a couple of months. They're like, it's my first solo travel trip. It's just to the next town, but I'm so happy. I'm like, yes, I'm happy for you. And then that is, there could be something that they like and want to do more of, or they could be like, oh, I did that. It's not for me. It's cool. Like you do you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right, cool. All right, thank you so much for being on this podcast and chatting so long about so many cool topics.
Of course. No, this was like a fun yeah, just like wherever the conversation flowed.
Exactly. So where can people find you if they want to start a conversation with you?
Yes, especially if you want to start a conversation with things that I'm very, very not that I wasn't passionate about anything we talked about today. But yeah, so my social media, it's all Honey Lune Hivery. So I'm sure there'll be some sort of drop and handle below. But yeah, Instagram, TikTok, or just like reaching out to me through old fashioned email. I respond to all. And I do just like love having conversations. So please reach out.
Exactly. And then you can learn a lot about interior design, mindful like color selection and feng shui and like all of the good stuff that you just don't even realize if you're living in it every day and how much it affects you. Or sometimes just the vibe is off after a time and then you just spice things up and then it just gets things flowing again. So cool. There's a whole other podcast episode we can talk about that. I guess.
I know. It's like, don't get me started.
Yes, that was the original goal, and we just like sideways right straight into travel there.
I'm okay. That might be, a podcast for the future.
Okay, put it on my notes. So thank you so much for being here.
Of course. No, thank you so much for having me. This was just like a real treat.
Thank you. Same here. Hi. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. This is one of the longer ones, and I absolutely enjoyed every minute of it. I wish I could have continued on and on and on, but maybe for a future episode. And if you have any information on any of the topics we provided that you feel like we didn't dive deep enough into it, you can come on my podcast if you want, or you can leave us a comment on any of the social platforms you will find down below in the show notes. So you can follow Marissa or I and then just strike up a conversation, maybe prompt a new train of thought, or maybe even request her services when it comes to making your home just beautifully, organically yourself in a way that feels particularly pertinent to your taste, to your era of your life. And it just like makes it lifted. Because so many of the just living spaces nowadays are just so generic. But I could go on and on about this. This was not the main topic of this particular conversation. So if you want to dive deeper into interior design, go follow Marissa. And if you want to hear more awesome conversations, go follow this podcast. And I will see you or hear you in the next episode, which will come out on Friday. So until then, bye.